Hi, we are ready for another week of science. This week's going to be fun in science because we're going to do some labs and we're going to take all that knowledge that we gained from our informational things that we did last week and all of the slides and the notes that we made, and we're going to put them to good use with some labs this week. So the very first thing that I want to talk to you about is conducting a fair test in science. So in science, there's variables. Whenever you do an experiment, there's variables. That's the thing that you're changing. You want to make sure you don't change too much, because if you change too much, you won't know what the effect was. So an independent variable is the thing that you're changing and it affects the change in the dependent variable. So you should have notes right here. And as we're going through this information, I want you to fill out your FAIR test notes. So number 1 says the blank variable affects the change in the blank variable. Well, that's what this slide just told us. The independent variable affects the change in the dependent variable. And so you're going to write independent and dependent on number 1, and then you'll go through and you'll just answer each of these things as I go through the video. Remember, you can pause or back up if you miss anything. Okay, so our independent variable is the thing that we change and it affects our dependent variable. So what these words mean is, and this is on your sheet as well, is an independent variable is a variable that the researcher changes in the experiment. So something that you change, the amount of water that you give to a plant, how much water is good for plant growth. So you would change how much water you give to each plant. So you're not going to change the location of the plant or move the plant around or give one plant more water than the other. Well, if that's the experiment is the giving of the water, that's the thing you want to change. And then that would affect the dependent variable. So the dependent variable is like what happened. Did the plant grow more? Did it grow less? Depending on the amount of water. And then a control variable means that you don't change it. The rest of those things, like where you put the plant, doesn't change. So control variables help scientists to conduct FAIR tests. So you're more likely to isolate the cause of change if you don't change too many variables. So if you're trying to figure out how much water affects plant growth, you only want to change the water. You don't want to have different kinds of plants or different locations of the plant. You want to keep those the same. So here's another example. Does the absence of sunlight affect plant growth? So an independent variable might be if there was sunlight or no sunlight. And it's going to affect the height of the plant. Did it grow more or less with sunlight or no sunlight? So the things that you control that you're not going to change is the type of plant. You're going to make sure both plants that are in sunlight and out of sunlight are the same type of plant. You're not going to change the amount of water. You're going to make sure you give both plants the same amount of water and that you water them the same frequency, that the plant starting size is the same, that the type of soil, type of pot, and amount of soil is all the same. If you keep all these things the same and you only change sunlight or no sunlight, then you will conduct a FAIR test of showing if sunlight affects plant growth. A good scientist observes, collects, and records data. And so an example would be sample A, a plant with sunlight, the date it started, the day it finished, and what happened. Sample B, plant without sunlight, the day it started, the day it finished, and what happened. So looking at the changes of the dependent variable will help you understand what happened. So an example would be the plants receiving more sunlight had more growth in 2 weeks. So sunlight did affect it as far as growth goes. So as I went through this, you should have filled out this FAIR test sheet. If you need to pause or go back, any of those things to fill out the FAIR test sheet, you can do that. Once you fill out the FAIR test sheet, that's all you need to do for Monday. So I'm going to go ahead and explain the rest of the week to you, because a lot of it is experiments that you're going to do on your own. And so I'll explain the rest of this stuff to you, but make sure your fair testing notes are filled out for Monday's science. Okay, on Tuesday, I want you to do this planning and investigation. I sent Lab 1 information home with you as to what you should do with Lab 1, and I want you to plan it out and talk about what are we going to make as the independent variable, what will be my dependent variable, what will be my control variables, what question am I trying to solve, what's my prediction, all of those things. And then you'll go ahead and you'll do that experiment. And this is kind of an example of this experiment being done in real life. So if you want to kind of use that to help you understand, you can do that. But then when you're done with your experiment, I want you to do this lab write-up here. So go ahead and do that lab write-up once you're done with your experiment. And that's what Tuesday's science is. So you're going to plan it out, you're going to do the experiment, and then you're going to do a write-up. And then on Wednesday, I want you to answer these questions thinking about the investigation. So I want you to go through and I want you to answer those questions, thinking about and discussing those as you go and filling that out. And then on Thursday, you're going to do another lab. So I'm sending you a lab that has instructions that have to do with a heat lamp, and it has to do with, like, we talked about how the sun affects water and land differently when we were learning about climate. So lab 2 has to do with that. So you need a heat lamp, some soil, some water to conduct this experiment. And if you don't have those things, I will go ahead and video this lab so that you can see how it works, and just let me know if you need that video and I will send it to you so you can complete the lab write-up. As also part of this lab is these graphs here. So you need to fill out the sunlight and the shade graphs, and also you need to graph the heating over time. Okay. You do not need to do the what happens part, because that will be what we do on Tuesday in science. So you're only today, the only thing you're doing is doing the lab, writing it up, and doing the graphs. And that's what Thursday science is. So Monday was the fair test sheet. Tuesday, you're going to plan the investigation. You're going to do the investigation, do the write-up, and then Wednesday you'll do the thinking about the investigation. Thursday you'll do another lab write-up, another lab, and the graphs. And then you'll save this, what happens to Earth's materials when they receive sunlight. We'll save that for next week. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions.